Planning Committee meeting of Akron City Council. All members are present. I'm not certain. I believe everyone is in from out in the hallway. Mr. Westcott, is everyone in from out in the hallway? Can you check for me, please? We have 3 public hearings. I didn't want, just in case. Okay, I think we're good. All right, thank you. Okay, very good. We'll begin the Planning Committee meeting of Akron City Council this afternoon, I should say. We have 3 items that are up for a public hearing, and the process for these 3 public hearings is that we will get a report from our planning department. After that report, we'll open up the public hearing and ask for comment from either in favor or against, or if there's any questions from the community in reference to the conditional use request. The public hearing portion. We'll close the public hearing. Then what we'll do is we'll open up to committee members for questions, and then after that we'll open up to all of council if there's questions, reference the conditional use. And then what we'll do is we'll basically repeat that process this evening at 7 o'clock, of which everyone is invited. However, the only main difference is this evening at 7 o'clock, the committee will make a recommendation to all of council, either to pass it, to turn it down, or to just take time and table the idea for some time. However, though, those 2 public hearings, we're going to ask if you wish to testify on the conditional zonings. If you could be sworn in from a representative from our law department before you testify this afternoon. We'll do that again this evening at 7, but please be sworn in from a representative from our law department if you wish to testify this afternoon.
If you wish to testify, please stand and raise your right hand.
Boy, these guys are...
Thank you. And please answer affirmatively. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give is the truth? Thank you. Do you swear or affirm that the testimony you're going to give is the truth? Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. Very good. The first item that is up for a public hearing today is authorizing a conditional use to place an outdoor advertising display billboard at 475 East North Street. Mr. Antonucci.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Contiers LLC is requesting permission to place a double-face electronic billboard display to a height of 205 feet to be visible to the State Route 8 bridge traffic on this property. The V-shaped display is proposed to be attached to a tapered monopole column to the rear of the building at 475 East North Street. Each LED panel would measure 14 feet in height and 48 feet in width for 672 square feet of area. Billboard will extend a maximum of 205 feet above ground level. The Urban Design and Historic Preservation Commission reviewed the advertising display and recommended disapproval. Guidelines for approving outdoor advertising displays are found in section 153, 385 of the zoning code. One such provision is that no ground bulletin shall exceed the height district as found in this code, or of a maximum height of 50 feet, whichever is less. In order to be viewed by the highway traffic on State Route 8, approximately 150 feet above, the display requires a height of more than 4 times this 50-foot limitation. The extremely tall structure would appear out of place adjacent to the bridge, overlooking the forested Little Cuyahoga River Valley below, and along the streetscape of North Street. Additionally, it would intrude on the views of recreational tourists on both the Freedom Trail and the Cuyahoga Valley Scenic Railroad. The Route 8 bridge is scheduled to be completely replaced with new separate northbound and southbound structures in the next 5 years. Great attention has been given to creating not only a safe bridge structure, but an attractive design as well. The sides of the new deck structures will be formed by 8-foot tall aesthetic fence panels atop a 42-inch parapet wall. Accent lighting will highlight the curves of the support structures beneath the bridge deck. One goal of the Land Use and Development Guide Plan is to promote the growth of a visually pleasing environment by providing visual relief and conserving natural and ecological resources through urban open space. Proposed LED advertising display would intensify visual clutter and detract from a location where the beneficial calming effects of urban green space are available. Both planning staff and planning commission recommend disapproval.
Thank you, Mr. Antonucci. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use. If you could please step forward and provide for us your name and address.
Good afternoon, Chairperson and Committee. My name is Kyle Kramer. I'm the attorney for Contiers LLC, the applicant of the conditional use permit. I also have here with me this afternoon John Carrera, who's one of the owners of Contier LLC. I'd like to take this time to thank the committee for allowing us to have the opportunity to be heard. Specifically, I would like to address some of the concerns that have been raised in the prior meetings with Urban Design and also the Planning Commission that have been reiterated this morning by Mr. Antonucci. After that, Mr. Carrera would also like to address some of the specifics and technical aspects concerning this sign, and then obviously we'd be happy to answer any questions that anyone from the committee may have, or if any members of the public have questions as well. The first thing that I would like to address are some of the more subjective components of the code sections that have been referenced. Specifically, we are looking at the criteria that is set forth in revised code chapter 153 section 474. Now, there's been concern by both of the prior meetings, the Urban Design and the Planning Commission, of the aesthetics of this sign, whether or not it will fit within the comprehensive plan, especially in light of the new bridge that's to be constructed over the course of the next several years. I would like to reiterate what we said in both of those meetings and make sure that everyone in this room is aware that Mr. Chiera wants nothing more than to work with the city in ensuring that the proposed sign that we have is not only harmonious with that area, but is complementary to that area. You'll see in a moment in his presentation some examples of signs that he's constructed in other municipalities where the municipality said, this is what we want the sign to look with, so it matches said bridge, said building, said area, and John's done a great job of meeting that. And so whatever visuals the city is going for with the new Route 8 bridge, we would be more than able to and willing to match that, and so this sign would look very much a part of the entirety of the new construction, not visual clutter, not taking up additional eye space as you pass the bridge. And so some of the concerns of the comprehensive plan and the harmonious nature, I think you'll see here in a moment, can quickly be alleviated. There's also been some discussion of the location itself being part of the Cuyahoga Valley National Park, or the River Valley, the scenic nature of what surrounds it. And as you can see from the memoranda that have been issued from the prior two meetings, that's simply not the case. The surrounding area, the address on North Street is an auto body shop. It's adjacent to the Juvenile Detention Center, a bus garage, a commercial excavating business, and the other side's also zoned commercial. This sign will in no way block any scenic views or some beautiful landscape. As it will be viewed from the bridge, it will block out the view of several trees that are in front of the detention center. That's what you'll see traveling both ways on Route 8. And so the last thing that I want to address in regards to that code specifically is the height of this sign. Correctly indicated will be about 205 feet from ground level as of North Street, only 50 feet above where it's visible from Route 8. And so the section 153-385 that was alluded to, subsection A6, if you read that subsection in full, it indicates no ground bulletin whose supports and braces are of steel or other approved non-combustible material and whose faces of non-combustible construction RFTW wood, as approved by the superintendent of the building inspection and regulation, shall exceed the height district is found in the code, or a maximum of 50 feet. The sign that we're proposing is simply not made out of such material. The face will not be non-combustible FRTW wood, and as such, you don't believe that this section of the code narrowly is applicable to the permit and the conditional use that we're requesting. And so I just wanted to set that before this committee. I'm going to allow John to elaborate a little bit on some examples of what this sign could actually do for the city. I think it's a great opportunity for us to, when I say us, as a Summit County resident who lives right outside of the city, for the city of Akron to be able to get access to some private funds to further enhance what we're doing with the Route 8 bridge. So I'm going to allow John to speak to that a little bit, and then I have a few more points I'd like to make in closing, and as indicated, we'd be more than willing to answer any questions from the committee or anyone here.
Thank you. Thanks. Yes, sir.
My name is John Kiria. I am the owner of the company that is trying to build the billboard. So this is the third meeting we've had with the city of Akron. The first one was with the planning and then the commission. And looking back, I kind of blame myself. I don't think I explained the sign very well. I think there's a huge miscommunication, because if you look at the first meeting we had was the planning and the urban development group. That one I can understand. That one I understand 100% why they would deny it, because they don't worry so much about the legality of the sign. They just worry how is it going to look on the environment. So from their perspective, I can see maybe they don't think it'll be good looking. So that disapproval is acceptable. The second was the commission. When we were here a few weeks ago for the planning commission, I realized that most of the folks did not know about the sign, and some of the questions they asked, it was very clear they have absolutely no idea what we're talking about. One of the gentlemen asked the same question like 4 times. What is the height of the sign? What is the height of the sign? But that is why we're here to begin with. So it was a little disappointing that they had not done any homework, and they're trying to make a decision in 2 minutes that took me 6 months to put together. One of the other ladies, she did not even know the exact location of the sign. She used her phone to Google to see where the location was the sign. So this time, I want to do it a little different. I want to make sure we're on the same page while you guys make your decision. So if I could pass these packets along.
Certainly. Sir.
All right. I'm going to just walk very briefly, walk you through basically the packet. On page 1 is just basically the location of the sign, just to give you an idea where on the city it's going to be. On second page, it's how it would look while you're driving on State Route 8. On page number 3 is how right now the bridge looks without the sign. On page number 4, this is the view from 4th Street. This is what they're saying that the sign will look out of place. You can see the environment. This is actual pictures of how Route 4, North Street looks like. It's a body shop, put a bit down, the sign will look 20 times better than that shop. That's a guarantee. On page number 5, this is provided by ODOT. This is the actual concept of the bridge. This is where they're proposing to build the bridges. On page number 6, this is my proposed sign next to the new bridge. You can tell it's a very good looking sign, definitely not causing any distraction.
No, ODOT's going to do that. Yeah.
On page number 7, I have worked with Ohio Department of Transportation. They know about the sign, they control the highway, and we went through the same thing, but legally, they had to issue the permit. The sign is 100% legal, just like any other sign. So whether I get denied or approved, it's more of a personal opinion, but as far as the code is concerned, so this, number 7, is the state permit allowing me to build that sign. So I went through them, I have a permit for it. Page number 8 is just an example, because I've had people ask me, like, what kind of advertising are going to be on this sign? So these are just normal businesses, McDonald's, Powerball, Kroger, Menards. Those are the businesses you will see on those signs. Of course, I'm a business guy, so I will not be putting things that are not offensive or something that's not required to be on the sign. On page number 9, this is on 480 in Independence, Ohio. This is probably 35 minutes from here. These signs are way taller than my proposed signs. These signs are 225 feet. Looking from the ground, you can see it's a really ginormous sign. But while you're driving from 480, the second picture, you can tell it's just a normal sign. There's nothing to it, it's just a normal sign. So I have reached out to the city, Mike specifically, because my company have set $1 million aside to do this sign. So all they have to do is tell us exactly what you would want to do with it, how you would like to see the sign, and we're willing to spend as much money as possible to make the sign fit whatever is good for the city. So this is an example of some of the signs that our sign could look like. Page number 11 is the same thing. The signs can be a good-looking sign. It doesn't have to be just a steel pole on the ground. And page number 12 is the same thing. One thing I can say is, so looking at this image, which is the 480 bridge, you can see the sign, even though it's big, because the environment, everything about the environment is also very big, it doesn't stand out of place. So for example, the new bridge that is proposed for Akron, it's 152 feet high. The trees that you can see from the highway means they have to be at least 150 feet as tall. So how can the sign be out of place when everything around it is the same height? So I don't know if you have any questions.
Just to very briefly wrap up, in addition, just to reiterate what John said, we can make the sign look however it needs to look to be comprehensive. But there are other signs similar to what we're proposing within city limits. The one that comes right off the top of my head is on West Market Street, right past Dart Avenue. Very similar concept. It's a sign that blocks the view of some trees right near a bridge. And so there are other examples that we have some photos of we could pass to you if needed. I'll get those in just a minute, but they're very similar signs within city limits that don't look near as nice as what we're proposing here. So obviously, the committee and council tonight will make the decision. We also wanted to just very briefly address, there are a handful of constitutionality issues that we view with the code section specifically as applied to this conditional use permit. John has retained counsel outside of the state in Indiana, who are constitutional experts, and should the conditional use permit not be approved, he does plan to move forward onto the next step of trying to get the rights to build this sign.
That's his option.
Thank you, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of this conditional use request at 475 East North? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone? Very good. Anyone wishing to speak against this conditional use request at 475 East North? Anyone against? Anyone? Very good. We'll close the public hearing portion at this time and open it up to any committee members that may have questions at this point. Ms. Mobian.
Mr. John. Well, how do you pronounce your last name?
Kirita.
Korea?
Yeah. Thank you.
Sorry for mispronouncing it. Are you the owner of the company?
Yes, I am.
Okay. You indicated that you have presented to a couple of different committees. I know you did the commission and you did the preservation committee. And you said one of them had not done their homework. Which one did you?
So what that comment was supposed to be is, without this packet, last time I didn't do a good job. I did not have this packet.
Oh, you didn't have the information?
I did not have a packet.
I see.
And it's my fault. This is the first time I've actually had some serious good luck with cities. Like I know I'm working with the city of Charlotte, North Carolina. The city is actually trying to have me come in and do a project like this because it's a huge investment. The city probably don't want to spend that kind of money. So last time, I just looked back and I was like, why is there such a miscommunication? I realized maybe some of the committee members maybe did not get 100% grip of the sign.
And your company is located where?
I am in north of Dayton, Ohio, Sydney, Ohio. That's my residence.
Okay.
Yeah.
But your business is located?
That's the city.
That's right.
But I have signs in just about 10 states.
10 states. If you look at page 6,
Okay?
now this is what you're saying that your proposed sign is going to look like?
Yes.
And it's a pie shape because it has the display on both sides.
Yes, it's they call them the V.
The
So
V.
there's two TVs. They're not parallel to each other. They are angled, and of course it's all met within the code. They allow you so much of a V to help visibility of the sign.
And could the staff help me understand? This sign will block what? What is the sign blocking?
Well, we feel with the sign up above, visible to the State Route 8 bridge traffic, it's going to block the view shed for drivers driving along State Route 8 out to the valley, essentially to look out over the trees. So it's blocking the general view of the valley as you drive across the bridge.
You know, when I was first looking at this, I'm trying to decide, am I looking at the Y bridge or am I looking at the Route 8 bridge?
It's 8 bridge.
This is Route 8.
Yes. This is the proposed new bridge. So on page number 5,
So on page
this is
number
what
ni-
the state is proposing.
Okay, on page number 9,
Okay?
at the top,
That is an example of 480 bridge in
Right.
Independence, Ohio. I just kind of wanted to show how a big sign will look next to a bridge. This is actual what is happening on 480. Those signs are taller and larger than my sign, and they don't block any view. That was just an example.
so the reason this is being denied is
Is-
because, I'm talking to the staff
Yeah,
now,
sorry.
thank you very much, is because it will somehow do something to the view that people have when they go across the bridge? Is that what we're suggesting?
It's essentially an aesthetic argument in terms of it's not going to necessarily fit with the views from the top of the bridge, and also there's going to be a new bridge construction, so there will be a brand-new bridge, that has some decorative features that
And
we'd
I would
like to
just-
protect.
And I would just add, fundamentally, the sign, there's no getting around it. It's 4 times taller than what the code allows. So it's 205 feet. The code allows up to 50 feet. There's also an aesthetic issue with the new bridge. ODOT's putting a lot of money into this brand-new Route 8 bridge, and one of the big design goals is to enhance how the new bridge looks, and there's going to be a parapet design that says Akron and some other aesthetic features, and so there's also an aesthetic argument about the way that the sign would look in relation to that new bridge.
And then just for,
Excuse me, you just used a word I'm not familiar with. Is this what you're referring to, where this Akron is going to be there?
Yeah, that's correct. I don't
It's
know
called
if that photo is the latest and greatest of their planned design of the bridge, but it would be a feature similar to what's shown in that photo.
And it's called what?
Parapet,
Parapet?
yes.
Okay. And somehow with this display billboard, it will be too much? Is that what we're saying? Or it will take away from the aesthetics of that?
Yeah, I mean, I think what we had put in the write-up to Planning Committee was of that nature, talking about the aesthetics of both the valley as well as the bridge.
and our Urban Design and Historic Preservation Commission also, reviewed this, and they do feel that it would be out of place there. One other thing for scale, just to get an idea of size, the height, last few cell towers that we've looked at, in terms of the monopole cell tower, those are around 100 feet. So this would be twice that height.
Mr. Chair, just one more question.
Okay.
So are we saying it needs to be 50 feet from the bridge, or, because you're talking about 205 feet from the ground? Is that what we're talking about here? Correct. And from the bridge, it would
Correct.
be what? The
Well,
part
one
that-
of the
part that
arguments
you
the
see.
petitioner was making was that it would only be 50 feet above the bridge, but the code, we're talking about the address on North Street, and the reality is that when you're on North Street, the only thing that matters is that it's 205 feet tall. So What it appears to motorists on the bridge is a different issue than what it appears to motorists on North Street.
But it seems to me that the argument that you're making, it has to do with the appearance from the bridge.
I think in the write-up, we discussed both the way that the sign interacts visually with the bridge when you're on the bridge, but also the way the sign looks visually and interacts when you're on the ground on North Street.
I can only tell you that I have been one that's been opposed to all these display signs all over the city, but they seem to be springing up all over the place on the expressway and everywhere else. So anyway, thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. My question is more so the ODOT approved the sign. Is that what this? This is the Ohio Department of Transportation. This certifies that Contours LLC has been issued a conditional permit for advertising device located at, and then they have. So is this saying that ODOT has approved?
Yeah, it looks like ODOT is going to approve it. Basically, they look at, really what they seem to care about mostly is it zoned commercial?
Okay.
The land that it's going on is zoned commercial.
And ODOT's the one that's investing in the bridge? Okay. So, I mean, these things are popping up everywhere. I don't have a problem with the way it looks on page 6. But my question is this. When these first started coming into our community, we had an agreement with, can't think who the folks are, but they put it off of 77 South and North. Clear Channel, yeah.
That's okay.
We had an agreement with.
Call you whenever we're ready.
Well, I thank you for the clarification, though. We had an agreement with them that if we ever needed to use them as a city, we would have access to those billboards. We also had an agreement with like churches and businesses that were putting them into our city. My concern is that something that's just do we have a set policy because these are coming into the city, they take up airspace? Do we have a set policy with everyone that wants to bring one of these in, where if we have a message that we want to get out in the city, we get so much billboard time since they...
We have, as you indicated, we've done that on the other signs. I can't really answer your question whether we have a set policy or not. That's something that's more been dealt with by the service director or the law department. And again, the planning staff is more, we're looking at this from a land use and aesthetic standpoint more than
Probably where we
anything
probably
else.
need to stay.
Excuse me.
No, excuse me, I'm the chair. Excuse me, Mr. Neal, if I could,
gave
I
me
just want,
permission to speak.
I'm giving you permission to speak. I would like to interject. And what I'm going to tell you is we've got to be cautious. Well, we have to stick to the issue of conditional zoning versus speech. And I just want us to be cautious on this because the speech part of it, we can't deny anything on what is actually going to be on that. But you were asking
No,
like
no,
what we're going
yes,
to
I'm
get out
asking
of
a
it, which is
question that's
speech.
pertinent. I'm
So
asking a
just
question
be
that's
careful.
pertinent
I'm
to
just
this.
asking you to please be careful.
I believe I am.
Stay in our lane.
I believe I am, because
Stay in our lane,
this
that's
is
all.
not going to deny or approve it. But what I'm saying is that we're bringing these in. We had started, when we brought these in, we had an understanding that when Clear Channel, I believe it may have been United Baptist Church, that we had an understanding with that policy. If that has to come from council or if it has to come from administration, I think it's something healthy that we keep, because this is it's a community asset, the airspace. Now, this is my other question. Who will receive revenue from when this billboard is built? I see something on here about, it all still has something to go into the decision. Well, it did when we were dealing with the cell towers. So, who owns this property? Who does it belong to?
It's not city property, so I can't answer that question.
Okay, thank you.
Samples?
I have a really quick question here. I heard the chairman say we're dealing with just the conditional zoning portion of this, but we keep talking about aesthetics. I'm reading this letter from ODOT, and I went online, and it says that State Route 8 is maintained by ODOT. So I'm just trying to understand, why is it coming before us if it's maintained by ODOT? And then we also, there's a digital board that sits on Route 8 as you come through the I-76, I-77 exchange. That's a digital board. How tall is that board? Are they meeting the same standard? Is there a standard as it relates to it being next to a freeway? And are we talking about zoning here? Are we talking about aesthetics?
We're talking about zoning, but part of the zoning code deals with aesthetics. The ODOT approval is just whether they're allowed to put a sign near the right-of-way. Because ODOT, and I'm not an expert on this, but ODOT has rules on the placement of outdoor advertising along all interstates. So back when the interstate system was laid out, there was this idea that every farmer in Ohio would want a billboard on their property, and so ODOT came up with rules governing where you can place those. That doesn't supersede our local government land use regulations in our zoning code. So this is a zoning issue. It's not a issue about whether or not signs are being able to be placed there from an ODOT standpoint. If ODOT had said no, then that would have been the end of the discussion from my understanding, but now it comes to us from a land use standpoint.
So, last question. When we talk about the digital board, the other one on the other end of Route 8 going south towards Youngstown, Barberton, you know what I'm talking about? The digital one usually shows the Akron youth stuff on it.
I'm not sure where you're talking about.
We're going towards Canton. The opposite way, we're not going...
South on 8.
Yes, south on 8.
South
so
on
we're going
8
the other
before you
way.
get to the
There's a
interchange.
digital board there. I don't remember that ever coming before council unless it was before I was here. What's the height on that? Can we find out what the height on that one was? Because clearly, if this is being maintained by ODOT, someone gave them permission to put that board there. And it's almost like we're talking about the exact same thing. If not, if we could get some clarification.
Well, there are other billboards along expressways that have gotten licensing from ODOT and have also gotten conditional use approval from council. We're not necessarily opposed to all billboards. There are some around the city, none that are 205 feet that
Okay, so if we could find out the height of that one, maybe that's an issue that maybe that they could go back to the drawing board on. I don't know if this is just zoning instead of, we're talking about looking into a valley, which I don't think has anything to do with zoning here. I would hope not. If we could find out that, especially if ODOT is the one that's going to build the bridge and they're telling them they have approval, if we could find out a couple of those things, I'd appreciate it.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thanks.
Ms. Keith?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So this is being brought before us because it is 4 times what we have stated in our ordinance that is allowed, correct?
That and any outdoor advertising display anywhere in the city, any billboard requires conditional use approval. Doesn't matter how tall it is or anything. Okay. But this one happens to be 4 times over the height limitation.
So those of us on council who have been on council have reviewed other ones that have come forward.
Yes.
Over the years. Okay, my issue with this is it's very obvious the pushback I have gotten in my ward over the years. They call this litter on a stick. I'm not saying that, that's what I have heard. But what I will say is it's like home rule, like we don't have a right to say what we want to be viewing as we drive our roads. This is not against you, sir, and your company. This is just, but I did hear you say if this is turned down here, it's going to go farther. That, you know, if that's the road you choose to take, I'm sorry, Mr. Chair, I'm not addressing you. But if that's the road that is chosen, I'm more than happy to stand up and say, as a citizen, I'm representing the people in my ward that say, just because we have some of these doesn't mean we want more of these to come before us. And as I look at it, even though I do think it is nice, I do think it is, looks like a nice sign, I've worked really, really hard on my Merriman Valley to make it as appealing as it can so that people are looking there. And actually, as you drive by there, you will get an essence of a bit of it. Is it going to block all of it? Absolutely not. But do I want to take away from something I have worked so hard on over the years to create a place of where we want to be? This sign, and I have driven North Street for 18 years. I've driven North Street. So that won't bother me when I drive North Street, because I'll just see that pole. That's what I'm going to see. But when I drive Route 8, it is not what I personally want to see, nor do I believe my residents. So I'm speaking for my residents also. But I thank you for coming before us, and I thank you for clarifying that this is because it's 4 times larger than what we normally approve. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Keith. Any other questions or comments, Mr. Swirsky?
Yeah, I don't see why we would not follow rules. Mr. Swirsky, turn your microphone on. I don't see why we would not, in this case, I don't see the social benefit. Why would we not follow the rules that were established to help protect the integrity of our community? And this would definitely be a visual disturbance and a hindrance in our effort to attract new people to come and live in Akron. One of the greatest strengths we have is that we're surrounded by a very beautiful canopy. We have a valley. We may, in the past, have been a little too lax in some ways about now protecting that as a potential economic development tool, as a way to attract talent to Akron. People look for livable, walkable neighborhoods. They don't look for the place that had the most egregious Chipotle signs. So with that, I just don't see how this is going to be a benefit to our community.
Thank you. Further questions or comments? Ms. Amobian.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I hate to say this, but it is true that I think we lost this argument a long time ago when we started putting all these billboards along the expressways. We have lost control of the display boards, and they are up and down Route 8, up and down 77 South and North. And when I have made the argument in the past that we should not be putting these display boards up, we have gone ahead and done it. I can only tell you that I don't see what the difference between this and what we've already done. So with that said, I'm just really concerned about this argument today. Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions or comments? Sims?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Like I heard a lot of commentary, so I just want to know what exactly you were asking us to vote on. Is it the height, conditional use? Is that the only thing that's before us?
It's the bill. Any outdoor advertising display in the city of Akron requires city council approval. It requires conditional use approval. So you have before you what this is going to look like. You have our report and recommendation, the recommendation of Urban Design and Historic Preservation Commission, which is disapproval, the recommendation of staff, which is disapproval, and the recommendation of Planning Commission, which is disapproval. So that's what you have before you.
So thank you, Mr. Antonucci. So are we talking zoning, or are we talking?
Conditional use zoning.
Talking zoning and land use.
So there's two things we're dealing with here. So
It's in the ordinance here. It's a conditional use request to place an outdoor advertising display. There's a couple of conditions no, actually there's no conditions as of yet. The recommendation is for disapproval, but what they're asking for is to exceed the 50-foot, I do believe, and what else? And any billboard in the city of Akron requires a conditional use pursuant to our code. So that's the question.
Right. So that is a zoning code issue. It
So
is in the zoning code.
Yes. So any billboard, we request a conditional use They come in, and then we vote on them. Now, the boards are along Route 8. Honestly, I don't recall voting on those, so it could have been beyond 10 years ago or 12 years ago. That we have, though, dealt with like 4 or 5 that are digital that, and this was like 7 or 8 years ago, but they weren't over 50 foot high. I do recall those. But those other ones, that's good questions. About the other ones along Route 8, I don't know. They have to dig and find some answers on that. But.
So we're going to look and find some answer to that. I just want to be clear on what the expectations for us. I get the 205 versus 50 feet, if that's what we're talking about. But if there's just a lot of commentary, I just wanted to be clear on what it is we're being asked to vote on.
Thank you. Very good. Any further questions or comments? Okay. Okay, good. I'll invite you back this evening at 7 o'clock. We'll have an additional public hearing. Afterward, the committee will then make a recommendation to all of council this evening at 7. But we invite you back this evening at 7.
Thank you, Chairperson and committee.
Thank you. Thank you all. Item number 2, the next item that's up for a public hearing is authorizing a conditional use to construct a 24-unit apartment building at 268 Wheeler Street.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Anthony Messina, doing business as Commercial Industrial Construction Consultants, LLC, is requesting permission to construct an apartment building on these combined city-owned parcels. The proposed 3-story, 24-unit apartment building will consist of a mix of cultured stone veneer, hardy plank siding, and vertical metal siding. Single entrance doors will be along the east and north elevations. Each floor will contain a mix of 1 and 2 bedroom units. A paved parking area with 24 spaces will be located to the rear or the south side of the building. 24-space parking area meets code requirements. The goal of the Land Use and Development Guide Plan is to promote a variety of new housing types and price ranges to meet the requirements and desires of the city's population. The anticipated rent for the units, which is $450 per bedroom, will be market rate comparable to apartment properties in the local area. The attractive apartment development will be an asset to this older University Park neighborhood. It is characterized by single-family homes converted into student housing and apartment buildings. The city would sell the property at county appraised value, which is $38,550. The plans are also subject to review by Urban Design and Historic Preservation Commission. Both Planning Commission and Planning staff recommend approval subject to the conditions. Thank you, sir. Very good. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use at 268 Wheeler Street. If you'd please provide for us your name and address, sir.
Yes, thank you.
This is in favor.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. My name is Anthony Messina. I'm the owner of Commercial Industrial Construction. We are a commercial industrial general contractor working in essentially the entire state of Ohio. This project here, we're venturing into a new project where we won't be a general contractor. We'll be the builder and the owner of the property for a long-term portfolio type position. And the plan is to build 2 or 3 of these over the next 4 or 5 years. I am a graduate of the University of Akron, so I've spent many years, quite a few years ago, and spent a year on Brown Street, 2 years on Sumner Street, a year on Kling Street. So I'm familiar with the area and understand the housing and the off-campus housing requirements. If I can, I've got some presentation boards.
Sure.
I could walk you through that a little bit more detail.
Oh, okay. We can share.
I just received these from my architect this morning, so they're a little rough. I apologize. But we went through a couple modifications of the plan working with Mr. Antonici. So this latest rendering shows the property running parallel with Wheeler Street It's roughly 108 feet long, 52 feet deep, and it'll be 3 stories in height. There are 3 handicap single-bedroom units on the first floor, and I think that'll meet code requirements. And then the other 2 floors up above will have, I think there's 8 two-bedroom units going up. So, again, this would be the view from the corner of Wheeler and Allen Street here. And as was read in the description, it will be a mix of hardy plank siding, stone veneer materials, and there won't be any vinyl siding on the building at all. This would be the view of the building from the rear side. The parking lot would be on the south side of the building. So, and we'll probably end up putting some wall pack lighting on the building itself, and maybe a couple light poles in the parking lot for security at nighttime. So it'll help light up the neighborhood a little bit. And that's basically the where the building's going to look. Floor plans, it'll be a 3-story walk-up building. You can see here we've got 3 one-bedroom units on the first floor. This is the parking lot side, so this would be your entrance into the building. There will be laundry facilities for the residents, 75 cents a wash or dry, whatever that's going to be. Mechanical room for sprinkler system coming in, all the utilities will come on the one side here. We're probably going to, as the landlord, we'll probably pay all the utilities and incorporate that into the monthly rate. Second and third floor are pretty much the same here. You can just see roughly the layout of each unit. You're going to have a kitchenette on one side. You have an oven, microwave. Probably won't be a dishwasher. Have a furnace in each unit. One to have HVAC systems specifically for each unit, and then 2 bedrooms on either side of a common use bathroom in the middle. So pretty straightforward. It's typically what you see. So.
Very good, sir. Is there anything else you wanted to offer? Okay, very good. Thank you. We'll continue the public hearing. Is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use at 268 Wheeler? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Very good. Anyone wishing to speak against the conditional use at 268? Anyone wishing to speak against? Okay, very good. Now we'll open up to committee for any questions reference this conditional use request. Ms. Amovian.
Thank you very much. I love the view. It's a beautiful facility. Let me ask you this. Do you have a targeted clientele that you're looking to attract?
It'll be for university students primarily.
Now, do we know all of the apartment buildings that we have on Exchange, all these apartment buildings downtown and so forth? Do we know what the occupancy is now? Are they exceeding 85% or whatever it is that we're looking at?
I don't personally know that.
Could we find out? Because I think at one point it was told to us what the occupancy was and what was it expected to be. I'm just curious because I know we recently had one landlord who had to sell his property, and luckily I think somebody took it over. I don't know for sure. But you're close to the ones not far from the Board of Elections, I think, in that area.
Right. I think it's 1,000 feet from Exchange Street, right? Yeah, it's near the McDonald's, and I think that's, I'm not sure what street that is.
No, I love the sketch, and the only thing that would concern me is...
I've got some projections in there of revenues, and about halfway through the packet for full occupancy at 24 units and at 21 units. So I think once I get below 20 units, that it becomes, break-even scenario. So yeah, I do need to have it 85% occupied in order to make money on the project, right?
Right. So the rent you're proposing is $450 to include everything? Is that what this is?
Yeah, I researched some of the existing older stock housing, the 1940s stock housing, and I mean some of that stuff is pretty down and dirty cheap, $350 a month per bedroom. So I need to make mine work. I need to be about $450 per bedroom, $900 per unit. Hopefully, as time goes by, we could run the rate up a little bit higher. So, but then we'll have a little bit of a fee from laundry revenues and such.
So you're saying one bedroom's 450, a two-bedroom
Well,
would be
the one
twice
bedroom would
that?
probably be closer to, $650 a month, something like that.
Oh, okay. I see this 450 in here, I just assumed.
Yeah, they've got a projection for the one-bedroom pricing and a projection for the two-bedroom pricing, and
Oh, I see.
that market's gonna bear, I mean, ideally, I break ground in March and have the building done by August 1st, and I'll be marketing, March, April, May, so I'll try to have the property, leased up, before the kids go home in May. So, then I'll be able to get a good gauge on what.
So I'm assuming you've done some kind of feasibility study to determine that this is needed?
I'll just, going on the whim that there is so much older stock housing there that, where you've got 5, 6 people using one bathroom. I'm assuming that people are gonna wanna have a nice new product to live in, so.
Have you not seen all those new apartments downtown? Downtown and on Exchange and all over?
Yeah, none of that was there when I was here, so.
Yeah, quite a few. But thank you very much.
Sure.
Further questions or comments? Very good. Hearing none. What we'll do is invite you back this evening at 7 o'clock, in which we'll have an additional public hearing and then make a recommendation.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir. The third item is authorizing conditional use to establish a child daycare center at 927 North Portage. Pat.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, committee members. Mary Dozier is requesting permission to establish a child daycare business center at this location. Proposed daycare business center, also known as Auntie Mom's Child Care and Resource Center, would be located in the former church with up to 60 full-time or part-time children, ranging from newborn to 12 years of age. The daycare would be operated Monday through Friday from 5 a.m. to 6 p.m. There'll be no overnight stays. Petitioner currently has 3 employees, but plans on hiring additional employees as needed. The outdoor play area will be behind the building and fenced. Petitioner stated that she has a bachelor's degree in child and family development and has 29 years of experience. The exact amount of children she will be approved to provide care for will depend upon square feet requirements set forth by the state of Ohio. Proposed use should not be intrusive to the neighborhood, as the existing building is over 100 feet away from North Portage Path right-of-way. Traffic congestion should not be an issue due to the length of the driveway, the location of the parking lot, and the children being dropped off and picked up at varying times of the day. The reuse of this vacant former church site should not have a detrimental effect on nearby homes. Providing quality daycare service is beneficial to the entire city, and as such, the planning staff supports this request. Both Planning Commission and planning staff recommend approval subject to conditions.
Thank you, Mr. Antonucci. At this point, we'll open up the public hearing and ask if there's anyone here that wishes to speak in favor of a conditional use to establish a child daycare business at 927 North Portage Path. Is there anyone here wishing to speak in favor of this conditional use request?
Good afternoon to the council and the chair. My name is Michael Dozier. I'm the husband of Mary Dozier. She's been a committed teacher for the Akron area for a number of years, 29 years or plus. She's very good at what she does in providing a daycare service that's most needed for all working parents. We just hope for a chance to provide a suitable place where the kids can come and get service and have a place to, that's an environment that's safe for them to learn in.
Thank you, Mr. Dozier. Ms. Dozier, would you like to say anything?
My name is Mary Dozier, and I live at 1274 Country Club Drive. I'm seeking conditional use to run a daycare out of 927 North Portage Path. I'm nervous.
Okay, thank you very much.
But I have been doing this for quite some time. I run a daycare out of my home now. I've been doing it since 2015. I am licensed by the state of Ohio. I have inspections twice a year. Food program comes in twice a year. There's rules and guidelines that we have to follow. So there's not like I'm trying to run, some type of mediocre child care program. I have rules and guidelines that are issued out by the state, and I'm just here to serve children and their families, that's all.
Thank you. Thank you both. Thank you. I'll ask at this time, is there anyone else here wishing to speak in favor of the conditional use request? Anyone else wishing to speak in favor? Anyone? Okay, is there anyone wishing to speak against the conditional use request at 927 North Portage? Anyone wishing to speak against? Anyone? Very good. Is there any questions? We'll close the public hearing portion. Is there any questions or comments? Ms. Amobian.
Mrs. Dozier, we're very nice people, so you can relax. Just curious, you have one in your home now. You're planning to move to another location?
Yes.
You're going to have two?
No, I'm planning to, well, right now I do have kids who are there till, in my home, I'm doing 24 hours in my home.
Okay.
But once I get in this building, I'm just going to go from 5 a.m. till 6. But I still have that little group of children that are still there till midnight. So once I close the building down, I'm going to ride those children out until that ends, and then I'll be done in my home.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you very much.
Further questions or comments from any committee members? Hearing none. Beyond committee, I see Ms. Keith would like to say something.
First off, I want to thank Mary Dozier. When she called for this conditional zoning, she did what Mr. Antonucci asked, which was to reach out to your council person. Upon reaching out to me, I hadn't heard any feedback. Then I did get some negative feedback, and Mary was more than happy to sit down. We had a meeting last week, was more than happy to sit down with neighbors that came and address the concerns. And if you look at the conditions, she met every condition that was brought forward as a concern. We put it as a condition. So if she sells her business and is no longer doing it, it would have to come back in front of us again for any conditional use. And what was hard for her to substantiate to allow the neighbors was, this isn't like a school where at 8 o'clock there's a rash of cars that come in and drop off their children, and then at 2:30 there's a waiting line to pick them up. This is all staggered throughout the day. And what Mary wants to do is continue to serve these people that's why the early time, and we have it in here, that she will be committed Monday through Friday from 5 a.m. until 6 p.m. So we don't have to worry about the weekends. And I've had a number of other people call me about this property, from having it be a music place to another entertainment venue. And I do believe that it sits back in, and it's not going to be a nuisance at all. In fact, I think the traffic will be cut back considerably from when it was used as Kingdom Hall. And the neighbors that did come out, Mary met with them and her husband met with them another day and walked off the property, just so that we have a good understanding of what is their property. She is licensed. She will be held to the degree that the state holds her to, with inspections that are random. So I believe this is a great use for a vacant building, and I'm hoping that the council will see that also.
Thank you. Thank you. For the questions or comments, Mr. Swirsky?
Just thank you for taking this on and for providing very much needed service to our community. We're going to be better off once you get going.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Thank you. For the questions or comments? Hearing none, thank you. And again, we'll invite you back this evening for the 7 o'clock public hearing. The committee will then make a recommendation to all of council. Thank you. I'm going to kind of, but not really, request time on the balance of the agenda. I believe we do have a substitute in on an item. Just give me just a moment here. It's item number 8 under the new list of legislation. Under the old list of legislation, it's number, wait a minute, it's number 8 also. How ironic is that? Number 8 and number 8, make it easy on everyone. And this is, I will read this in. We had a conditional use public hearing on this a few weeks ago. I know the Ward Council representative, Mr. Kamer's been working with the petitioner on this, but I'll read it in for the record, Mr. Keith. Hoping you're there. I don't see you.
I'm still here.
Okay, yeah, block it here with the...
Offered by Fusco, ordinance authorizing conditional use to establish a cleaning business at 795 East Wilbeth Road and declaring an emergency.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Keith. Mr. Antonucci, is there, this is a substitute. What's different from before?
Yeah, this added a condition essentially that the cleaning operation is essentially tied to the current owner of the property. So basically reads that the conditional use is especially for a cleaning operation under the conditions put forth herein, and that in the event of a change in ownership of the property, the authority granted by this ordinance shall be terminated.
Cool.
So.
Perfect, thank you. Is there any questions or comments? We did have a public hearing on this a couple weeks ago. This is a little bit of a tweak, and so I see Ms. Amobian has her hand up first, and then Mr. Neal.
I know the last time we talked about this, there was some question about the kinds of equipment or materials that she could possibly have. Is this where the inspection by the fire department will confirm that she doesn't have any combustible or whatever
Yes.
inflammable materials? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Neal?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. This may just be semantics, but where it says the conditional use is expressly for the cleaning operation under the conditions put forth herein, and that in the event of the change of ownership of the property. What if the ownership of the property doesn't change, but the ownership of the business, someone takes over the business and they just run it out of that home? Is that considered, I mean, because the way it's worded, it says property. Should the ownership of the business be in there too, or are we getting to, I understand why we're putting that in there, we're concerned, because it could be that they continue to own the property, but the ownership of the business changes. And as long as, if they would just assume the same criteria.
Well, maybe that might be up to the councilman on that interpretation, I would imagine. You're talking about if she leases it, the business, to somebody else?
And I know it would defer to the council person, but this goes back to again, us standardizing our process and how we do these things. You know, when we say ownership of the property, that's one thing. Ownership of the business is another. Just in the future, we may want to consider, you know. Thank you.
No, thank you. Good question. Mr. Kamer, do you have a thought on this? Or we can ask Law to revisit this and we can go over this? Mr. No, you're cool.
No, that's a good, valid point.
It's a very good question.
Something that we should look at moving forward. I don't know if it really, I mean, if we want to take another week and have the law department weigh in, that's fine. And hopefully we can pass it next week. If not, I'm open to passing it today.
Well, what we could do is take temporary time, have discussion, and then the committee will need to be pulled this evening, no matter what we say, and I'll make sure you're aware of how we handle that. So that's cool. All those in favor of temporary time signify by saying aye. Aye. Nay? The ayes have it. Very good. So we're going to request time on the balance of the agenda, short of any concerns or comments, and we'll move on to item, this is new legislation. I reckon it's item number 5. Okay, well, we just had the public hearing on 475, so that one's good. 5, refer for public hearing. 6 is the other public hearing that we just had. So, okay, just guessing later on. And item number 7 is the other public hearing, 927, North Portage Path. So 8 is the one we just discussed. Ripping through them here. 9 is authorizing the purchase of a vacant lot on Dan Street for the Dan Street Parking Expansion Project.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, committee members. We've been requested to secure some extra land for the police training facility up there. They have large training events. They need excess parking. This would be purchasing part of what is currently the grass area. We'd put in some improvements and provide additional parking, and this would be at appraised value.
Very good. Questions or comments? Is consent agenda okay?
That'd be fine.
Very good. Questions or comments? Hearing none, is there a recommendation for consent?
Recommendation for consent.
All in favor signify by saying aye. The ayes have it. Very good.
Thank you.
Thank you. Item 10, declaring the improvements to certain property located in the East Gate 2 urban redevelopment area to be a public purpose and exempt from real property taxation, I should say, declaring the construction and rehabilitation of certain real property is a public purpose, providing for the collection of service payments in lieu of taxes and the deposit of those service payments in the urban redevelopment tax increment equivalent fund. Very good.
Thank you, Councilman Fusco. My name is Alyssa Gregg. I'm with the Office of Integrated Development. We have another piece of TIF legislation, tax increment financing legislation. This is part, thank you, of the Eastgate Urban Redevelopment Plan, now known as the East End Development. IRG owns the building, and they did finish build out on 2 of their office spaces. So we are applying for tax increment financing for 6 parcels. The development agreement was passed in September of 2014 with provisions for TIF. IRG will be getting the income from this TIF stream. Do you have any questions?
Very good. So we had approved the development agreement in 2014, and this is reference to the improvements for the SUMA project, is correct?
4 of the parcels are for SUMA, and 2 of the parcels are for ICANN.
For who, I'm sorry?
ICANN School.
Oh, okay, ICANN School. Gotcha. Thank you. Questions? Is the consent agenda okay on this? Okay, very good. Is there questions or comments? Mr. Neal.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Not a question, but a comment. I believe I made it a couple weeks back. In light of just the economic conditions within the city, pending school levy, just like to really have an understanding of the impact, pro and con of the TIFs that we're doing in conjunction with everything else. I think we really do have to see how this is impacting overall finances. So I heard you when you said this one was 2014, but if we can get something concrete as we come into the first quarter of 2020, that would be helpful as we're looking at how to address.
If I may, every time we do a TIF application, the company fills out they're part of the tax incentive review committee. So they submit a piece of paperwork at the end of every year that I believe gets brought before council as well, just saying that they have been keeping up with their end of the bargain. And in addition to that, I would mention as far as the schools are concerned, they never necessarily lose out on money. They are operating with the same budget that they start with. So that's the increment portion of tax increment financing.
But doesn't that defer with the pay system?
So,
Adele?
yes, Mr. Fusco, your question?
I don't have a question. I was recognizing you so you could answer the question.
Thank you, okay.
That's the job
So-
we have here.
That's what I thought. Just as a reminder, the way tax increment financing works is that we enter into an agreement with a developer asking them to make an investment in an underutilized piece of property. In this case, 1 million square feet of unused property having been where Goodyear has moved out. So instead of letting that sort of decay, we're hoping that IRG will invest and bring new tenants and new jobs with new income tax into the city. In order to help those things happen, we use development agreements for each individual project. Those development agreements come before council individually. In this case, it was a huge development agreement covering 1 million square feet of property, and that happened in 2014. What happens for the schools and for everybody else is there is a value in 2014, actually the value was in 2007, of what those buildings and land was worth. When we do the TIF application, after the actual investments have been made, we do a TIF application, then the state approves it, they divide that in half. The school never loses the base revenue that they have been receiving. What they don't get is that additional investment for 10 years. At the end of 10 years, that new value goes on and the schools gain that.
Okay, thank you. And I appreciate that. I mean, I understood that. The one we looked at last week, I think, had a 30-year. Did the TIFs vary? Because the one last year, for some reason, 30 years.
So every TIF application is applied for 30 years. The compensation agreement that we entered into with Akron Public Schools requires that, allows them to we put 25% of the value on for 10 years, and then 100% of the value on for the last 20 years. So in essence, the schools are giving up 75% of the new value for 10 years, but then they are made whole in years 11 through 30. So the actual TIF runs for 30 years, but the impact on the schools is they always get the base value, they get 25% of the new value for 10 years, and then they get 100% of the value for the last 20 years.
Okay, thank you for
Sure.
Thank you. Is consent agenda okay on this? Good. Sure, oh, Ms. Amobian.
I don't have a question, but Exhibit 5, do we have 6 improvements or 7? There's a 3 there, and there's nothing next to the 3. Was something taken out?
There is 6 parcels involved in this. I'm not sure what we're looking.
It's the TIF-funded improvements, Exhibit B. Oh, that's fine. It looks like something was either eliminated or...
Oh, yeah, no, that's a paragraph. That what happened when somebody hit that space too many times. See how there's this paragraph goes right from there to there? This paragraph has an extra space. That's a typo.
Oh.
So there was no number 3. It's just like an extra space in the
So
document.
so the number should be 6.
The number, yeah, should just be.
Okay.
Skip number 3.
That's fine. I just wanted to make sure. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there any further questions or comments? Is there a recommendation for consent agenda?
Second.
All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. The ayes have it. I believe that's all we have. Thank you very much.
Okay. Next committee will be Public Service. Pardon me? You're going to cancel it? Okay. Public Utilities is now canceled.
Official notification.
I'd like to call the Public Service Committee to order. Members are present except for Councilman Hoke, who has been called in. And I'd like to have an approval for our minutes from our previous meeting. Is there a motion?
Motion to approve.
I have a motion. And I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the minutes pass. We have 2 items under public service on our old agenda, and until we have the Equalization Board meeting, I would like to refer these items. Okay? And then next we have our new items on the agenda, which is number 11, which is an ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into a contract or contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase of materials and services needed by the various divisions and departments of the city for a period of time not to exceed 3 years, approving the specifications therefore and declaring an emergency. Mr. Lovell.
Thank you, Madam Chairman, members of the committee. This is our annual bid legislation for materials and services. Listed below are the quantities and the items that you have in front of you, and we can answer any questions.
Are there any questions from the committee? Councilman Fusco.
Is consent agenda okay?
That would be fine.
You're biting at the bit here.
I'm just asking a question.
No, I'm just kidding. And that was a good question. Are there any questions from members of council that are in the chambers? Seeing and hearing none, I think there's been a motion for the consent agenda. Is there a second? Okay, I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that'll be placed on the consent agenda. We have one more piece before us, number 12, ordinance authorizing the purchasing agent to enter into an agreement or agreements without the formality of advertising for bids for the purchase of miscellaneous supplies, services, repair parts, and labor for machinery and equipment used by various divisions and departments of the city for a period of 1 year, authorizing payment therefore and declaring an emergency. Mr. Little.
Thank you, Madam Chairman and members of the committee. This is our annual no-bid legislation for materials and services, and consent would be fine.
Mr. Little, would you explain the no bid, why we even have this, and why it comes before us every year?
Well, probably Kim could probably answer this better, but probably back in August or September, she receives prices for all these items. So we do receive prices, and then some of these items have a time response where we don't have time to bid, like let's say for a board up, or let's say we need salt, or in an emergency. Even though we have the queue prices, some of the items at the wastewater plant, water supply, if a motor goes out, they're on the list where we can go ahead, call the vendor. And some of these are OEM things, like in sewer when we have to get a vac truck fixed. Right. That's why we have the no bid legislation.
So it's like being proactive, knowing that this is probably going to happen, we just don't know when and what.
Could be an elevator repair, that type of thing.
Okay, so I just wanted us to have some clarification on that, so that we all knew what we were voting on here. Are there any questions from the members of the committee? Any questions from members of council? Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kim, I know I saw you Thursday? Yeah, so I know you're actively working, trying to make contact with minority vendors. Since these are no bid, that means that these can be directed more specifically to particularly, possibly, vendors that aren't represented in our procurement numbers?
I have actually made up a brochure that I take with me now that lists all the commodities off of the no bid list, so that the vendors know what I'm looking for. So we're hoping to pull some more companies in.
Can we as members of council get that list so we can help you? Because I mean, every time I go, I see you, so I know you're working hard on that. So.
Yes, I can get that for you.
Thank you very much.
Mm-hmm.
That's a good question. Did you want to ask it, or do you want me to ask it for you? Okay. The question is, do these come before Board of Control? These no bid items?
It depends on how much the purchase order is for. Anything over $5,000 goes before Board of Control.
Okay. Okay, good. Thank you. Is there any other discussion? I want to thank you, Kim Heron, for creating that booklet that will help close a gap maybe that we had, and being astute enough to do that. So what is the recommendation? What would you like
Consent
to see?
Would be fine.
Okay, do I have a motion for consent?
Consent agenda.
I have a motion. Do I have a second? I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, that will be placed on the consent agenda. Is there anything else to come before this committee? Hearing and seeing none, we are adjourned.
That's it. Okay, next we have public safety.
We'll go ahead and move forward and call the public safety meeting to order, please. All members are present except for Councilman Bob Hoke. All right, like I said, all members are present except for Councilman Bob Hoke. We did have a meeting on Monday, the 25th. Can I get approval of those minutes, please? Second. I have a motion, a second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right. With that, we're moving forward. Ordinance authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee after publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts for the repair and or replacement of the concrete apron located at or around Fire Station 11 and declare an emergency. We have Service Director Chris Little in front of us.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman and members of the committee. Fire Station 11 on Akron Peninsula Road in the Valley. We're replacing probably about 25% of the concrete at that station. So in front of the garage doors where the engine pulls out. So this is to improve the apron. And it also will prevent further damage to the surrounding concrete because once it starts to go, then we'll lose the rest of it. So we're kind of being proactive in this replacement.
All right, thank you. Any questions from committee members? Council members in chambers? Oh, we have Councilman Zach Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Little, would you happen to know what the thickness is of this apron in front of the station there? The concrete slab?
I think it's 8 inches, sir.
8 inches?
Yes, sir.
The reason why I ask, there's another ordinance coming up for Fire Station 10.
Yes.
Same kind of scenario.
Yes, sir.
The new fire stations that we're building, this seems to be a problem that's reoccurring. Are we looking at something maybe to reinforcing that? That pad right there in front, so we don't have to replace it in the future, like with Fire Station 2, either with rebar or maybe like.
Well, all our concrete, we do have a spec where we do have reinforcing in it.
Mm-hmm.
There's actually fibers in it, and there's actually steel in it.
Fiberglass. What is causing this? I mean, it's a recurring, in your estimation.
Well, this is original to the station.
Okay, and what's the age of that concrete?
1995.
Okay. You say 8 inches?
Yes, sir.
Is that the standard, I mean, at other fire stations throughout the country? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Zach Milkovich. Any other questions or comments in regards to this piece? All right, what's your pleasure on this, Chris Little?
Consent would be fine.
All right, motion for consent, please. Second. I have a motion, a second by Rich Swirsky. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll place that item on consent agenda. Our next piece, authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee after publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts for the repair, renovation, or replacement of the kitchen at Fire Station 6 and declare an emergency.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. We are going to totally rebuild the kitchen at the fire station, which will include new cupboards, new lighting, stainless steel countertops, which currently a lot of our stations when they were built had Formica or that type of thing. So it'll be stainless steel, new sink, commercial grade flooring. So it's a total rebuild of this kitchen.
All right, thank you. Any questions or comments? Committee members first. Councilwoman Keith.
It's just a chef's question. How long will this kitchen be out of commission while this is being done?
Go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
So we've done a few of these
Okay.
so far, and we work with the contractor to try to limit the downtime of the actual kitchen. So far as we even put in a temporary sink for a while we're having the countertops fabricated. So it's a bit of an inconvenience, but as far as actual no use time for the guys working there and ladies, it's usually only roughly a week where they're actually not able to use it at all. So the turnaround time is pretty quick.
You know, that does seem funny, but however, their shifts, you have long shifts, you know, so you are eating your meals there. It isn't like you can go to a restaurant and sit down and eat. I'll volunteer my crock pot if they need it, okay?
Appreciate that.
Thank
We'll
you,
take out.
Councilwoman. And that was District Chief O'Neill speaking. So, any other questions or comments? Committee members, council members? We got Councilman Zach Mokovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And a note here says that it's, you know, it's created areas of growth for mold and is attracting ants and termites. Have we sent some people to eradicate those insects?
So yeah, we have addressed the insect problem, but the damage is still left behind from them being there.
Have we inspected the other parts of the building, make sure that those termites haven't spread to any other parts of the building?
We have. When the exterminator came out, we had them address the whole building just to make sure they weren't in other places.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilman Milkovich. Any other questions or comments? All right, Chris, what's your pleasure on this one?
Consent would be fine.
I'll make the motion for consent. Can I get a second?
Second.
All right, I made the motion. We have a second. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll place that item on consent agenda. Our next piece, authorizing the Director of Public Service or his designee after publicly advertising for bids to enter into a contract or contracts for the repair and/or replacement of the concrete apron located at or around Fire Station 10 and declare an emergency. Chris?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. This is the same as the first piece of legislation you introduced. We're replacing the apron at 4th Street over in Kenmore in front of the garage doors to prevent further damage to the rest of the concrete.
All right, thank you. Questions or comments, committee members, council members in chambers? Oh, Councilman Zach Milkovich.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Again, we're addressing the same issue. I've got to ask, since it's in front of the garage, where are we going to park our equipment, our trucks? Are they going to be, does it affect are they going to be stored inside, outside, or?
So we're working with the contractor. We're able to run out of one side. It's a two-bay, each station has 2 bays. So during this process, we've lined it up for them to do one side, and we'll run out of the other side, which we can do, and then flip-flop. You know, so it doesn't interrupt service at all.
All right, thank you, Councilman. Any other questions or comments in regards to this piece? All right, Chris, what's your pleasure?
Consent would be fine, sir.
Motion for consent, please.
Second.
I have a motion from Marilyn Keith and a second from Rich Swirsky. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, moving on. Authorizing the mayor, our next piece is offered by Mayor Horgan, authorizing the mayor to enter into a contracts after publicly advertising for bids for the purchase of miscellaneous materials and services needed by the Department of Public Safety and for a period of time not to exceed 3 years, approving the specifications, therefore, and declaring an emergency. Now, who's going to present this one? Oh, you are. Okay. All right, good. Thank you. I was kind of worried there for a second. I see you behind the chair. All right, thank you, Kim.
You're so welcome. This is an annual ordinance that we ask for every year. This is for miscellaneous safety equipment and services that we got bids for. Is there any questions?
Thank you. Any questions or comments from committee members, please? All right, council members in chambers. Is that all right? Okay. What's your pleasure? I apologize. I have a motion and a second by Rich Swirsky. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, we'll put that on the consent agenda. Thank you, Kim. All right, the next piece, resolution offered by Councilman Bob Hoke, 2019, opposing and objecting to the application of Clutch Gentlemen's Club LLC, doing business as Gentlemen's Club, 1890 South Arlington Street, Akron, Ohio, 44306, for a Class D1 and Class D3 liquor permit, 1546665, now pending before the Division of Liquor Control, and declaring an emergency. And we have our very own City Prosecutor Gert Wellms here.
Thank you, Chair. We had your assistance in 2018 to file an objection to the renewal of this liquor permit. There were multiple violent offenses, including shots fired. This liquor permit is ultimately looking to be taken over by Mark Northup. Mark is a former Akron police officer who resigned recently based on some allegations of his behavior, in addition to 5 other discipline actions. In the meantime, Mark has taken possession of the building and is selling liquor already BYOB. These, as well as other issues, have already been brought to the attention of Liquor Control, and per Liquor Control, they are currently working on illegal sales and investigations at this location already. Given the fact that they are not complying with the very limited rules, at this point, we are asking for objection of this liquor permit in its entirety.
All right, thank you. And thank you for the presentation. Before I ask anybody for their comments or questions, I did talk to Councilman Hoke, and he did ask us to hopefully suspend the rules on this piece since he's not here with us. And also, please consider the possibility this evening as passing as council as whole. So with that, any questions?
Motion to suspend the rules?
Oh, let me ask for questions first. Any questions from committee members, council members in chambers? All right, so Rich Swirsky did make the motion to suspend the rules. Can I have a second? And we have a second by Councilwoman Keith. All in favor? Aye. Anybody opposed? All right, that was pretty easy. Thank you, everyone, for coming down. We're adjourned.
Thank you.
Next, we have rules. Right there's a schedule.
Oh. 1 second. Up here. Glad we're going to pay for it. I'm glad we're going to pay the rules first. No.
Problem with the planning department wants to put at their billboard. I mean, I go along with them on that. Okay. Whatever they say.
There you go.
And Anucci left me a message.
Oh, just relax. What else you got to do? You got all week to do it.
Yeah.
A little bit. He wasn't even really. He was fine. He just said, next level. That's hard. You don't have to tell us that because we pretty much already know.
About utilities, they already have to do it. Okay, all right, they're going to schedule it.
How you doing? Madam Chair, anytime you're ready.
Now, Mr. Clerk, I am ready. So I will call the, which meeting am I calling? Rules Committee meeting to order. And I would like approval on the minutes from our past meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
Motion to approve.
We have a motion. Is there a second? I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, the motions, the minutes pass. And we have one item that was by accident taken off of our agenda. So it is back on today. And let me get it right here for you. It's, you'll find it under your old. So looking for it, it isn't under new legislation. It's under old, under rules. And it's an ordinance amending and supplementing Title III Administration, Chapter 30, Mayor and Council, Section 30.11, limits on monetary and in-kind contribution and loans of the Akron codified ordinances, and declaring an emergency. And the sponsor of this was Councilman Neal. So may I turn it over to you, Councilman Neal, to speak on behalf of this piece?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Sure.
This piece came in to address what I believe is a concern with influence in our election process. The legislation, one, addresses the one ordinance that Councilman Fusco had brought in when he wanted to ask us to increase the finances piece. So in the legislation, it asks that we increase the campaign contributions amounts, but that we not do away with council and the mayor accepting money from PACs. And the reason for that, you know, we have a lot of conversation in our community about the Elevate Akron report and the equity issue. And all of this is holistic. Not speaking politics, just speaking facts. This body was elected to address the issues and concerns of our constituents. We had a piece that came in that dealt with moving the primary. And this body could not come to an agreement. So per our charter, the piece was stuck in committee. Of course, the administration moved to push that issue, had the dollars and the resources that came from PACs and groups to hire people to go out, put that piece on the agenda. How that came up is, of course, it impacted our election process. Folks who may not even live in our city, but were able to give money through these PACs to influence our elections. The pieces as proposed also speaks to an article that was in, and it's an attachment to the legislation, the article from Monday, February 4th, 2019, where it talked about these CEOs and folks who give contribution, and it speaks to how much they give under surprising news, how much they give to influence contributions, and that a lot of these folks do business with the city. That concerns me. So for the integrity of our elections, I'd like to see council step up and address this, because I believe, again, it addresses several concerns that we talk about in this horseshoe all the time. One is understanding the importance of having fair, inclusive, equitable process. When we talk about the disenfranchisement of segments of our community over the last 10, many would argue over the last 30, and if it's been over the last 30, it's been since this city's been in existence. It focuses on commerce, but when we look at what is the crux of what led to this conversation about equity, which is this country's history, there's 4 pillars that influence and create this inequitable society. One is commerce, one is government, one is religion, and one is education. Those 4 institutions supported that institution of slavery. This is what we're talking about when we talk about an inequitable community, inequitable society. These are all derived from that original sin of our nation. So when we talk about our races here, to create a more, we're talking about Elevate Akron being more inclusive, having equitable, I mean, and again, not talking politics, just being real. When it came up, there were 2, and this council spoke out against when our president did something like this. There were 2 persons of color that were targeted to be removed from council. And all this was possible because of the money that was influenced to push, to move the primary from September to May, where this body that was elected had much debate, much discussion, but we couldn't come to a decision. So, to take the influence of money out of politics, to everyone has had the opportunity to read this article, which is in the February 4th issue of the Beacon Journal, to understand that there's many things that we say are just politics that are really covers up for a lot of the things that create the inequities that we see in society. And the PAC money is one of them. So I believe it is in this council's best interest, on behalf of our citizens, to raise the limits as my colleague had suggested, so those who are in a position to give more can give more. But then folks will know exactly who's giving. Because what's disturbing, the most disturbing thing that was in the article in February 4th was that, a lot of these people that are giving the money are the ones that are, through these PACs, are the ones that have contracts with the city. And it's in the article, it states about how their money influences different races. So that's the reason for bringing this piece before us in council. I think it sets a good standard on us addressing a key factor that is creating inequities within our society. And we speak about it. We know that there was just something in the paper this past Sunday about how critical it is for us to address the things outlined in the Elevate Akron report. Like I said, commerce does not stand independent of itself. The politics and that we practice supports that as well. So that's the reason for bringing the piece forward, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Neal. Are there any comments from members of the committee? Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you. We respect the comments of Mr. Neal and the aim in terms of this particular piece, this proposed limits on monetary and in-kind contributions and loans. The couple things that stand out to me, and primarily, I guess this would eliminate altogether, obviously the $750, assuming this would pass, it would be $1,000 from PACs, which would also impact the contributions that we get from organizations such as the labor groups, labor organizations, which they don't have a lot of times their dues that they pay weekly. What comes to mind, just nonprofit type interest groups, if you will. Some call them special interests, but like the Progressive Dems, I know they donate to different candidates and such. This would eliminate that altogether. However, I think what we're doing is just, I don't know, because it also sounds like the aim that you were talking about is and I don't recall the name of it off the top of my head, but a United States Supreme Court ruled that that these super PACs, or what have you, just call them super PACs, they can be formed. I don't like it any more, I think, than anyone else here in terms of they don't. We are probably under the most restrictive rules in the state of Ohio, if not maybe even the United States. One of the top 10 cities, I would bet, in terms of how much we can receive. Our reporting, you know, is pretty strict in terms of our reporting, in terms of how much we can receive. But in terms of this other piece, that's a United States Supreme Court driven, the super PAC piece, that they don't have to report, you know, who donates to that. There's no entity there, and I don't know, you know, if this piece here, I don't believe this piece would address that particular portion of this, of our current rules. And I am concerned, though, to be fair, like, you know, those that contribute to the PACs, of which right now currently it's $750 is all, that's the maximum amount. If this would pass, I understand it would be $1,000. But those that typically donate to those, the PACs that are regulated, the PACs that we report on our reports, you know, we divulge exactly who is donating, who is giving to us, and that's reported, and there's full disclosure on all of that. And so my opinion is that is fair, and that is, you know, to me personally, $750 or $1,000 isn't going to sway me, you know, in terms of a vote one way or another, to be honest and frank with you. And others, I can't answer for those, so I won't. I'm just concerned about restricting their voice. You know, people who are in labor organizations, because that's who comes to mind first for me anyways. And full disclosure, I've received donations from labor groups. You know, those are the folks that are, you know, they're just kicking in a little bit every once in a while, and then that's up to their respective unions in terms of if they're going to donate to individuals or not. But the other piece of what you're saying is, and that was the United States Supreme Court, I can't think of the name of the, as someone is here from law department, I don't know if somebody could speak to this, but what's the name of that, the case for Citizens, is that it?
Citizens United, yes.
Yeah, am I in the right on this? I was just curious if I could ask. Madam
Yes, you
Chair,
may.
okay, thank you. Would this impact the Citizens United decision from the United States Supreme Court? This particular piece of legislation, would this impact that?
This particular piece does not address the independent expenditure of funds, which is what Citizens United dealt with, which is basically people can spend money to support individuals' candidacy as long as they do, or issues, as long as they don't actually collaborate with those, directly with those campaigns. The issue here might fall more within, those groups are still considered, have rights on the First Amendment for like the political action committees, and those groups do have the right to contribute to candidates. And that is where this is going to more directly, is the right of those groups to actually contribute to people directly.
So would this inhibit their freedom of speech for PACs?
The short answer is yes. This is probably not in line with existing precedent as far as what you can do with political action committees. The theory behind political action committees, and Councilman Neal and I have had a fair amount of discussion on this issue, is people who don't have the financial means to make a large contribution, like all the way up to $750 or whatever it is, they form together to try to give themselves greater weight, and that's what the purpose of political action committees in many ways is so that you can join into something that gives yourself a little bit more of a voice. But then those are still limited, just like an individual's contributions are. But the super PAC then is a different thing, where they can never contribute to an actual candidate. They can't actually cooperate with the candidate, but at the same time they can contribute a lot of money to support a candidate. And I believe that's what the article Councilman Neal referred to. What was happening there was it was in support of issues, support of candidacies, while not directly collaborating with them. But I don't know for sure. The article is not completely clear about that.
Thank you. Thank you. And again, like I said, the decision by the United States Supreme Court, that would be, I don't think that's hitting the mark on this particular piece. I respect the aim, but the thing of it is, I do know, and I didn't bring my file with me. I should have, but I did do some research. The law department helped with regards to, whenever I first initially brought in the piece. And the one thing that stuck out for me, not only how much that we're permitted to receive, but on top of that is the PACs as well as the parties. They're aligned with how much individuals. And for us in the state of Ohio, we are clearly below everyone else because other cities, Cleveland, Cincinnati, Columbus, others, they are permitted to receive donations from parties as well as PACs. And theirs were like $3,000, $4,000, $5,000, $10,000 was their maximum amount, whereas ours is currently $750 for an at-large, or I believe $500 for a ward person. So ours is clearly, in terms of these type of donations from PACs, the lowest in the state of Ohio based on that previous research. And I'll try to dig it out to share with everyone. Thank you.
You're welcome. Anyone else on the committee? Councilwoman Amobian.
The first part would be nice. The second part is a concern, only because these small amounts that we get from these very small political action committees, the very small ones, I think, I'm not sure, that what I would love to see, but I don't know if this really addresses it, is when these, I don't know if they're called super PACs, they could be, is when they can pull together a whole lot of money to purchase ads and do different kinds of things without giving them directly to the candidate. So, and I don't know, is that a super PAC? When you can do things in support of a candidate and not give it directly to, and you can spend almost endless amount of money?
That is, I think there's a little bit of nuance to it, but yes, that is the general idea, is that as long as you don't give directly to them, and you can't talk to them, you can't talk to the campaign either, so that you can't have, you can't be having a response like, I think this would be a good ad. You can't have that kind of communication. Sure. It has to be completely independent.
So this legislation would hurt the small council member like myself who's getting small dollars as opposed to the big dollars. So that's my only concern about it.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I believe I've received from one of the labor unions a year back, at the last past election, I did receive some dollars. And would it possibly take, because let's understand, we're not silencing anyone's voice. The PAC is not a living, breathing human being. The people that give to the PAC can still give to us. What it does is that it allows, and if you look here, $1.27 million, it allows for the money to come in and influence. And this is an all Democratic council, so let's be real. We knew that our party was broke. So where'd that money come from? We've always said that we were concerned of the influence of the Republicans in our elections. That's why we didn't want to go to a nonpartisan primary. The Democratic Party was broke. So where did this $1.27 million come from? Yeah, I don't think it came from folks that contribute to the Democratic Party, because the Democratic Party was broke.
Can you tell us where you're referencing the $1.27 million?
I'm looking at the supporting documentation in the Beacon Journal article, Monday, February 4th, 2019. It's under surprising news.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am. So I think again, keeping a holistic look at what we're talking about in this council. When we talk about creating inclusive, equitable government, trust me, most of the folks, and if you read the article, if you've been reading the Beacon Journal's articles on the economic conditions within this city, most of the folks, if they have the ability to max out, they don't have the ability to again turn around and max out to a pack. So again, this is also protecting a special group that has the ability to give their personal check and then give the check to a pack here, a pack here, a pack there. So I just think for this council, and again, this is something that's not going to come up for 4 years, so it can be debated. And I do respect my colleagues' concern about, possible litigation and whatnot, but I've said it here, and I don't say it lightly when I say it. There have been many cases that folks had to challenge the status quo that made it possible for many of us to sit around this horseshoe, to even have the ability to vote. That does not concern me. What's right is not always legal, and what's legal is not always right. On behalf of our citizens, the majority of our citizens, let folks give their nickels, their quarters, and you know what? If nobody's accepting PAC money, it kind of evens it out. Now you have to deal with it. Now you have to deal with the individuals, and money doesn't influence our elections as much. Again, I know we're coming up on a year when the Charter Review Committee will look at things, but I think it's good for this body to show some leadership and make a statement about we're protecting the average citizen's voice and vote. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councilman Neal. Councilwoman.
Just a follow-up comment. I don't think what's being proposed here is going to impact that, because the PACs, the ones that I receive funds from, and maybe most folks around the horseshoe, can only give me the maximum dollars that are allowed. Those groups that do the large millions of dollars or hundreds of thousands of dollars, this is not going to change that, because they can still do whatever they want to do outside of the candidate if they, quote, believe in the candidate, so to speak. And I do understand the point you're making. There is too much money in politics, but I don't think this is going to change what you are proposing. And that is the real concern. I get $750 from, the Marriott group. That's a PAC. I get a few dollars from the People's PAC. Those kinds of things. They only have small amounts of dollars to give. Individually, they could probably all give me $25, $50 or something like that, but they're not going to give me thousands of dollars. And that's why they, pool that money and do things supposedly outside of the candidate. They can't show that they have direct contact with the candidate, but, no one is stupid in this political world. It's just that this is not going to change that, I don't believe. Thank you.
Thank you. Ellen, would you like to
Yeah, I just
share
wanted
with us?
to actually reinforce what Councilwoman Amobian said and clarify that I have the news piece you're talking about, the Beacon Journal article, and the piece that's before you as it's drafted would not govern or restrict that expenditure in any way. The piece before you only addresses donations given directly to candidates' campaigns, and the $1.2 million that's referred to in this article are independent expenditures that are not donated directly to candidates. So just so everyone's aware of the piece that's before you and what it would be governing, Councilwoman Amobian's correct. It's going to be PACs that are donating up to $750 to individual candidates, as opposed to super PACs that are expending larger sums of money independent of candidates.
Thank you.
Councilman Fusco, and then I'll go.
Just that, again, I understand your aim, and that is, I believe, these impacts, what have you, but in reference to that.
Jeff, turn your microphone on. Thank you.
I'm kind of still new here. The, not counting administrative fees or filing fees, the group has dropped $1.2 million since 2012. Since 2012 to pass 5 ballot issues, mostly for children's services in Akron Public Schools, and elect 1 candidate, and that was Dan Horrigan. So that's like the history, I guess, of where this is, the intention here is. And me personally, I think the aim is true, just kind of like misses the target. With all respect, I understand where you're going with it. But for me personally, that's where I'm kind of at. And do you want to vote today or tonight, or, because if so, I'll make a recommendation.
Madam Chair, may I?
Yes, you may.
Okay,
Thank you. Councilman Neal.
Seeing that we brought in new legislation saying that we clean the slate, I would like to have a vote so that, you know, where this council stands is state. One thing, well, a couple things. Rarely does one piece of legislation address all the, I'll use the term, I don't want to say egregious, but challenges that we have when we're addressing an issue. You have to start somewhere. This money does not restrict anybody from giving. What it does is those who have the money to give more can hide it in a PAC. There's a reason why we say you can only give so much money to a candidate. Most of our citizens can only afford it. Just because they pull their $25 together doesn't mean that they're not going to, what they do, they give it to you directly. But those who can write a check for the full $750 10 times over, will give it to this PAC, this PAC, this PAC, this PAC. Okay? That influences races. It's stated right in here when it goes down and says how much they gave. Never before had that much money been raised for a mayoral campaign. And then the fact that these folks have contracts with the city should concern all of us. Now, is it saying anything is done wrong? No, we know that's politics. Okay, that's a part of the political process. You support someone, your agenda becomes a part of their agenda, and you get, and you know, nothing saying that, but as much as possible, this body, the representative body of, you know, collectively the city, should, as much as possible, protect their voice, so that their voice is not compromised in any kind of way. And again, if we were to pass this, it would impact all of us equally. And again, it would set the discussion to refine this in whatever way it needs to be refined, because the next election isn't until 2023. Again, whatever we pass, I'm sure will be looked at by the Charter Review Committee as well. But if we do nothing, a body that was elected to lead, I think it sends a louder message. So thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you.
Mr. Welcome. Councilman Fusco?
Yes, thank you. With that, I'd like to make a recommendation for adverse report on this particular item. I'd like to make a recommendation for an adverse report.
Is there a second? Did you second that, Councilman? Okay. And there was a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be written down as an adverse report and brought before us tonight. Okay, and the other 2 items on the old agenda have been filed. There's nothing new to come before us. Is there anything else to come before the committee? I would like to mention that I did not mention that Councilman Freeman and Hope were not present today.
I have it down.
Okay, thank you. Okay, we are adjourned. And I'm back up again. I do. Oh, economic development is first, I think. Right.
Let's see, utilities was canceled, you now have economic development.
So I'm not next.
I got it. I got it. We'll now open up economic development with all members present except for Councilman Hoke. Can I get approval of economic development minutes of November the 18th, 2019?
Motion. Second.
Got a second and all in favor? Aye. We have one piece to come before us. An ordinance approving the addition of the Covenant of Grace Church located at 3400 Copley Road to the Copley Akron Joint Economic Development District, authorizing the mayor or his designee to amend the Copley Akron JED agreement to include said properties and declare an emergency.
Good afternoon, Madam Chairwoman and the committee members. The legislation before you is a request for two properties owned by Covenant of Grace Church to be added to the Copley Akron Joint Economic Development District. The two properties located at 3400 Copley Road contains two buildings and approximately 2.69 acres of land. Copley Township Board of Trustees approved the properties to enter to the JED to connect to the water lines. And now we're requesting Akron City Council's approval to add these properties to the Copley Akron Joint Economic Development District to connect these water lines. Request approval for this.
Thank you, Mr. Westcott. Thank you, Mr. Westcott. Is there any questions from members of the committee? Any questions from members of council in the chamber? Councilwoman Omobian.
And I think this is kind of similar to the other piece. So I see the advantage for the church. They get hooked up to the water line, right?
Yes, that's correct.
And the advantage to the city of Akron is that we get to collect, what, property taxes or what? What do we collect?
No, income taxes.
From what?
From the employees within the Joint Economic Development District.
So the employees of the church?
I'm sorry, and also we'll be also looking at new customers for water.
That's connected with the church?
Well, yeah, to be for the church, and also within that church, there will be a Montessori school that's going to be located inside the church.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilwoman Omobian. Any other members of council? What's your pleasure, Mr. Westcott?
Consent will be fine, thank you.
Can I get a motion for consent?
Motion for consent.
All in favor? It's on the consent agenda.
Thank you.
There's nothing else to come before economic development. We are adjourned.
Okay, we're waiting for Mr. Freeman, I believe. Is that correct? Okay, go ahead. I guess you're in charge. Mr. Freeman is not here yet. Okay, let me go find Marilyn, I'm sorry. She's coming, all right. She's eating. Pardon me? What are you talking about? Freeman never comes around when there's money involved.
I'd like to call the Budget and Finance meeting to order. All members are present except for
I like that how I say all members are present, except for Councilman Freeman will not be here and Councilman Hope, but we do have a quorum. There is, our first order of business is to approve the minutes from our last meeting. Is there a motion for approval? I have a motion from Councilwoman Amobian and a second by Councilman Milkovich. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on. There is no old business before us. What we have today are a number of pieces. The first one, we have 4 pieces before us to be approved today. The first one is an ordinance amending ordinance number 93-2019, passed March 25th, 2019, and ordinance number 275-219, passed September the 30th, 2019, which established the annual appropriation for the current expenses, other expenditures, and the capital outlays of the City of Akron for the fiscal year ending December the 31st, 2019, and declaring an emergency, and there was a substitute and offered as an amendment.
Correct. Thank you, Madam Chair. Yes, so this is similar to the legislation that was introduced last week. We did identify 5 additional areas that we want to make some modifications to the appropriations this year. You were just distributed a memo. So a couple of the modifications have to do with grant funds, our CD grant and our emergency shelter grant. We identified some additional expenditures that we'll be going through this year. And then we also had some adjustments to our TIF fund, to the issue 4 fund, some additional expenditures from the carryover projects that came over from last year. And then in our sewer fund, we identified a project that was previously charged to another fund that it was kind of a multi-fund project, and more of those expenditures should have been charged over to the sewer fund, so we needed some additional budget for that. So those are the primary changes. If there's any questions, I can answer those. We would like to just put this on the consent agenda for next week.
Okay. Are there any questions from the members of the committee? Councilwoman Amobian.
You know, there's something I don't think I've ever been clear about, and I don't know if I will be today. But when we talk about the community development block grant dollars, will we ever get a budget for each year to find out how much we're getting for that year and then how we plan to spend those dollars? I know that we come up with more CDBG dollars as different projects come up, but then we also hear that we never have any money available when we ask about other projects. So is there a way for us to have the amount that we have for this particular fiscal year, because they are annual dollars, aren't they?
They are annual dollars, but my understanding is there is a difference between the federal grant year and the way that our fiscal year, which is a calendar year, lies. Right. So there's some overlap there that it's hard to appropriate dollars from the city's perspective for our fiscal year that exactly match what the HUD dollars that are allocated to us are. So there's because of that timing difference.
And you're talking about what, is it October 1 to September 30th?
Yes.
You know, even if we got that budget and that amount and how we plan to spend it, that would be fantastic, even though it doesn't coincide with our fiscal year. Because I hear of all these different projects that come up, but we still hear that there are no dollars, but then certain things come up, and then there are CDBG dollars. And again, it could be because of the overlap, it could be because I don't know the exact amount we're dealing with for that year, but that would be nice to know. How much are we dealing with come October 1st? And then how do we plan to spend it? That would be nice to know.
Okay, that is something that we can discuss within the Office of Integrated Development as they control those dollars, but that's something that we will look to do.
Okay, thank you very much.
Any other questions from members of the committee? Any questions from members of council?
Hearing and seeing none, the consent agenda? Is that
Yes,
what you'd
thank
like?
you.
I'd like to make a motion for the consent agenda. Is there a second? Okay, I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on the consent agenda. The second piece to come before us is an ordinance authorizing the Director of Finance to pay costs associated with the city's participation in miscellaneous organizations, associations, and agencies, and declaring an emergency. Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So this is an annual piece of legislation that we do that covers many of the organizations and associations that the city belongs to. Listed in Exhibit A is the all-inclusive list of these particular associations. This legislation is very similar to last year, with the exception of the Ohio Municipal League was added to this year's piece, where it was not on the piece that we passed last year.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from members of the committee? Councilwoman Amobian.
I know it was not on the original list last year, but it did come forth
We ended up,
later.
yes, correct. So we ended up, submitting those dollars for our membership in 2019.
Exactly. For some reason, this list looks shorter to me.
I did compare it with last year's piece, and the only difference I noticed was that,
Ohio League?
one line there, yeah.
Okay. Maybe I'm just thinking.
Any
okay.
other questions from members of the committee?
Thank you.
Any questions from members of council? Councilman Neal.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to speak on behalf of the benefit of us having membership. I think we all know our benefit with National League of Cities. I mean, we have several members that are engaged, the educational tools, the resource that comes from just being able to pull from that. But I wanted to share with this committee, because there was question about the viability of our membership with the Ohio Municipal League. And I'll say it's pretty much like if you get a membership to the gym, you got to use it to get some benefit from it. But I will say, because of our discussion and the relationship that we've formed with Mr. Kent Scarrett, I'm happy to say that Ohio this year passed in their board passed and finance to hire a consultant. Ohio will become what we believe only the second state in the nation to develop an urban agenda. And that's huge, because we know how the state is gerrymandered to where we have a state rep, state senator, they have most of the urban districts gerrymandered to where their voices is silenced. It shows for a state that went for Trump how folks understand that we have to have an inclusive, we hear it here on the city level, they understand on the state level. So this body and our colleagues in Cleveland, Youngstown, Warrensville, Dayton, Columbus, Toledo, Cincinnati will be able to work with leadership from the Ohio Municipal League to form an urban agenda. That is huge. And so kudos to this council to understanding the value of our membership, but like anything, and I think we need to really assess all of these that we're a part of. I remember when I was on NEFCO, every time I went, I learned something. We need to be engaged, because when we become engaged, our voice can be leveraged. I think it's important when we look at these dollars that we're spending and we're wondering if they're well spent, well, we're going to see direct benefit from this Ohio Municipal League, because there are some huge projects coming down from the state level. I believe the state rail system is coming back, and we're going to be able to have some input. So thank you, Madam Chair, for just an opportunity to share on that.
Sure. Anyone else from council? What is your pleasure, Mr. Fricker?
Consent agenda is fine.
Okay. I'll make a motion for consent. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, this will be placed on the consent agenda. Number 3, ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond of the city in a principal amount not to exceed $10 million for the sale to the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund of the State of Ohio to finance the cost of improvements to the city's wastewater system, pledging certain revenues from the city's wastewater system
on a subordination basis to secure the payment of the principal of and the interest on the bond, and authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, the trust agreement and other documents, and the taking of other actions related to the issuance and sale of the bond, and declaring an emergency.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is a 45-year bond issuance for a CSO project. This is for the Dwayne Green project. We are looking at very low interest rates right now. It's anticipated that this project would have about a 1.3% interest rate. So we are trying to lock in this, and we do ask for suspension of the rules on this piece.
Thank you. Are there any questions from the committee? Okay. Any questions from members of council? Hearing and seeing none, I would like to make a recommendation for suspension of the rules with a favorable report. Is there a second?
Second.
And I have a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Would you say suspension of the rules?
Yes.
Did you? I'm sorry.
Okay.
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, we will move on to number 4, and this will be placed under suspension of the rules. So number 4 is an ordinance authorizing the issuance of a bond of the city in a principal amount not to exceed $99 million for the sale to the Water Pollution Control Loan Fund of the State of Ohio to finance the cost of improvements to the city's wastewater system, pledging certain revenues from the city's wastewater system on a subordinate basis to secure the payment of the principal of and the interest of the bond, and authorizing the execution and delivery of the bond, the trust agreement and other documents, and the taking of other actions related to the issuance and sale of the bond, and declaring an emergency. I just want you to know, I was in the Robbins group when I was in first grade reading, and to be able to go through this without a period, honest to Pete, Sister Evangelist would be so proud of me today. Okay, please go ahead, Mr. Fricker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. This is also a 45-year bond for a CSO project. This is for the Headworks project at our water reclamation facility. Also, a very good interest rate on this. It's the same, approximately a 1.3%, and we are asking for suspension of the rules on this piece.
We want to get locked in at that,
yes.
Correct? Are there any questions from members of the committee? Any questions from members of council? Suspension, I would like to make a motion for suspension of rules with a favorable report. Is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing and seeing none, we have covered everything on our agenda. Is there anything else to come before this committee? Hearing and seeing none, we are adjourned.
Thank you.